Hello friends, welcome back to Learn-It-Guide tutorials. This is our 8th video in our Jenkins tutorial series in which I am going to talk about upstream, downstream jobs, sequential builds on Jenkins, and where do we use this kind of approach for the automation and how do we create it with examples. Links related to this tutorial series and documents will be mentioned in the description. You can make use of it. These are the topics we are going to cover throughout this series. Also, we'll add more topics in the future. Before getting to the topic, just a small request to those who are watching this video for the first time. We have already uploaded a lot of videos and tutorial series on Ansible, Docker, Kubernetes and other technologies too. Please have a look. If you are interested in learning, then do subscribe now and click nearby bell icon for more interesting and useful videos. Let's get started. On Jenkins, if you have multiple jobs that has to be triggered sequentially, then we can use an approach called upstream jobs or downstream jobs. If you see this picture, you have multiple jobs, upstream jobs, downstream job 1, job 2, job 3. So, an upstream job is configured in such a way that it will trigger the other projects which are job 1, job 2, job 3 as a downstream based on the status of the upstream job. If the job is success, then job 1 will be triggered. Also, if the job is success, the job 2 also will be triggered. So here, these two jobs will be triggered based on the success state of upstream job. If the upstream job is failed, then the job 3 will be triggered. Similarly, we can configure multiple jobs to be run sequentially based on the status. If any job is configured to be triggered after a particular job, then that job will be triggered as a downstream job. This diagram will give you more clarity. So I have one job, something like a triggered job called build app. And this build app will be triggering the other downstream jobs. And if the build core is success, then this particular job is triggering the other jobs. But in order to create such approach, we should have the understanding our workflow. What is our application? How do we create the Docker images, or how do we bundle our packages, or where is it stored? How do we check out the package, and how do we deploy the packages on the target environment? The target environment might be a server or some containerized environment. So all these workflow should be very clear. Then only we can configure this kind of approach. To make it clear, I am going to configure a few jobs with upstream and downstream model. So this is my workflow where my developers will be writing the code to a GitHub repository, and this particular GitHub used for my app called Bus app. So my developers will be writing their code to this GitHub repository on the branch called develop. And my target is on containerized environment, that is Kubernetes. So for Kubernetes, obviously we would need a Docker image to deploy application. Once the developer committed the code on the develop branch, I need to build my Docker image. Then that should be pushed to my Docker Hub repository. That repository can be used to deploy my application on Kubernetes. So these many stages are involved to have this complete workflow. So I'm going to have a Docker image job that will be used for building my Docker image and pushing my Docker image to Docker Hub. The other job would be to deploy my application on Kubernetes. In order to build my Docker image, I would need a version to tag my Docker image. That version can be get from this trigger job. So already I have created a Docker image job, also deploy Kubernetes. Let me go through this first. Click on configure. So this job is mainly used for Docker image build and Docker push. In order to build a Docker image, I would need a Docker version. So I have enabled this parameterized option to get the Docker version input from the user. And I have set a default value as 3.0. and my Docker images and other resource files are available on this GitHub repository. And this is a credential I will need to pull my GitHub. And this is a branch that is developed. On the build steps, I have simply created one execute shell. Simply it will list the files and it will print the Docker version that user being provided. Then the next stage would be to create a Docker build, to create the Docker image. And this is the Docker image tag. Once the Docker image is built, then immediately the image will be pushed to my Docker hub along with a tag. That's all we have in this particular Docker image job. On the deployment job, again, I have used the same Docker version parameterized option, because in order to deploy my application on Kubernetes, I would need what image to be deployed and what version. Again, I would need Docker version. Here I have defined some default value. And this is the build step for deployment. So I have exported my kubeconfig to manage my Kubernetes cluster. And again, I have just printed the Docker version. Then I will get the status of the pod. And this application is hosted on default namespace. And this is the command I'll be using to deploy my application called bus app along with this Docker image. Let's go and create a triggered job as an upstream job. Click on new item, bus app build, let it be freestyle project, click on OK. Enable this option to get the input from the user, and we will select string parameter and it should be Docker version. Just set any values as a default. Now, since this is my trigger build, now how do we configure this trigger build as an upstream and Docker stage as a downstream? The options are very simple. Since this is my upstream job, then I have to select my downstream job. On build trigger, there is an option called build after other projects are built. If you enable this option, this will ask you to enter the job. If I select any job over here, then the job you have selected will be the upstream job and this bus app build will be downstream job. And based on the status, if it is stable, if it is unstable, if it is failed, or if it is aborted, based on the status of the job will be triggered automatically. So this option should be selected if this particular job is a downstream job. But in my case, the bus app build should be an upstream job. So I need to select a downstream job. For that, on the post build action, you can see an option called trigger build parameters after other build. But for that, we need to install a plugin. Let me go to my Jenkins. On Manage Jenkins, go to Plugins. On the available plugins, search for Parameterized Trigger. So click on this and install. I will tell you why you would need this Parameterized Trigger. So it is installed. Just save this page and just refresh it and again configure the page. On post build actions, we can see an option called trigger parameterized build on other projects. And why do we need this option? Because for my Kubernetes deployment, I need the input of the Docker image version. Then only it can be deployed. So that version is a parameterized variable. So I need to pass that variable from this job to the other job. For that only I use this option called trigger parameterized build on other projects. And this is the option can be used as a downstream jobs. Or even you have one more option called trigger build on other projects. This option also can be used for your downstream jobs, but this will not pass your environment variables. That is why I go with the other option. Trigger parameterized build on other projects. If I select this one, it will ask you to enter the downstream jobs. Okay, here just type the job names. It will list you all the jobs. Here I will select bus app, the Docker image. This is going to be my downstream job for the bus app build. It will accept multiple jobs, so it has come with comma, but it will not. That is why I am getting this warning. Just remove this comma and trigger when build is stable. If you select this option, parameters will not be passed to the other job, but I need that parameter. So I will select this one, and here current build parameters. Any parameters are available on this job will be passed to this downstream jobs. That is why I select this option. That's it. So we have created a trigger job. Through this, we'll get an Docker version input, and that will be passed to the other job, that is downstream jobs. So these two things are done now. Okay. Now we need to go to Docker stage or Kubernetes stage to configure upstream or downstream jobs. Save this configuration. So immediately once you have saved the option, here you can see the downstream projects. If you have multiple downstream projects, all these projects will be available here. Even if you have multiple downstream jobs that has to be triggered sequentially, then again go to configure. On this trigger parameters build on other projects, you can add more trigger. For example, if I select anything, something like create environment, just for an example, and I will not pass any parameter, just click on apply, save, and if you see, it will show you all the downstream projects. So I have created this bus app create environment as a dummy downstream projects. Let it be now. Okay, let's go to the Docker image configuration. Click on configure. So this is already a parameterized job. Now on the post build actions, I'm going to select trigger parameters build on other projects to select my downstream job, that is deployment. So here again search for bus app, deploy Kubernetes, remove this comma. Now obviously only if it is success, then I want this deployment should be triggered, and I would need build parameter. Click on save. Now if you see this Docker image, you have an upstream job and you have a downstream job, because this particular job is in middle of these two jobs. Now if you go to deploy Kubernetes, refresh the page, here you can see only the upstream jobs, because it is this particular Kubernetes deployment is the last stage. So it is clear. So this is a builder trigger, then Docker image stage, then finally it will deploy on my Kubernetes. If I click my build with parameter, it will ask you to enter the Docker version. Here you can put your preferred value and click on build. Once you have started the build, this will trigger all the build immediately, but we cannot view the workflow. For that, we need to install one more plugin for pipeline view. Here on plugins, if you search for view, it is a lot of plugins are available, but I would prefer to use delivery pipeline. This is the one. Even you have more like Ocean Blue, Build Pipeline, still you have more. It's up to you. Click on install. Okay, the plugin is installed, and this plugin is useful only to view your workflow in a visualization. In order to create that pipeline view, just go to your main dashboard and click on this new view. Here you can see more options: delivery pipeline view, list view, my view, and delivery pipeline view for Jenkins pipelines. And these options have enabled because of that plugin I have installed. So click on this delivery pipeline view and give some name and create. Immediately it will give you the settings. You can play with these settings. Here on this components, just click on add. Just give some name. So trigger, and here you need to select the initial job. Here it would be bus app build. So this is my trigger build. And final job is not required because on the initial job itself we have configured our upstream and downstream model approach. So automatically that will be fetched. So just click on OK. Now if you see this bus app view, you can get the visualization. So this is my trigger job. Then it will trigger my sequential jobs, that is bus app Docker image and bus app create environment. But this one I have simply created. It has no downstream job. So immediately bus app Docker image, if it is success, then it will trigger the deploy Kubernetes job. So this is how we create upstream downstream jobs on Jenkins for a complete automated workflow. Same jobs can be created with pipeline scripts. That is a single file called Jenkins file that can be used to create this kind of multiple jobs in a single file. We'll talk about that later. See you in the next video. Till then, keep practicing and have fun.
How did you feel? Is it helpful? Appreciate our efforts in the comment section below. Hit like button, share with your friends about us, subscribe our channel to get further updates. Stay connected with us on social networking sites. For more free tutorials, visit our website www.lanetiguide.net.